Welcome to part 2 of an introduction to adolescent development. Let's talk about the nature of development with respect to adolescence. Development is a pattern of change that begins at conception and continues through the lifespan. Developmental processes include biological, cognitive, and socio-emotional processes. These processes are inextricably connected and interdependent. Biological processes are those physical changes within an individual's body. Cognitive processes are defined as changes in thinking and intelligence. Socio-emotional processes include changes in relationships, emotions, personality, and social contexts. For the sake of ease, human development is often described in terms of periods. Let's briefly explore the developmental periods that occur in childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. As this is a course on adolescent development, we will briefly outline childhood and adulthood. However, remember to pay close attention to the information on adolescence. Childhood includes the prenatal period, infancy, early, middle, and late childhood. The prenatal period is the time from conception to birth. Infancy extends from birth to somewhere between 18 and 24 months. Early childhood from the end of infancy to 5 or 6 years of age, and middle and late childhood extend from 6 to 11 years of age. Adolescence is the developmental period of transition from childhood to adulthood. Adolescence begins at approximately 10 to 13 years of age and ends somewhere late in teens. A key task of adolescence is the preparation for adulthood. Developmentalists typically describe adolescence in terms of early and late periods. The early periods correspond roughly to the middle school or junior high school years and include puberty. Late adolescence corresponds approximately to the latter half of the second decade of life. Career interests, dating, and identity exploration are the focal points of this period. Much like childhood and adolescence, adulthood is not a homogeneous period of development. Developmentalists often describe 3 periods of adult development: early, middle, and late. Early adulthood is thought to begin in the late teens and continue into the 30s. Middle adulthood ranges from approximately 35 to 65 years of age. Late adulthood lasts from around 60 until death. Although these developmental periods provide a clear, concise way of describing individuals at different points in their lives, it is often the developmental transitions and the important aspects during these transitions that allow us to better understand individuals. An example of a developmental transition is the movement from childhood to adolescence. Childhood to adolescence involves a number of biological, cognitive, and socio-emotional changes. Biological changes during this period include the growth spurt, hormonal changes, and sexual maturation that come with puberty. Changes in the brain during this period enable adolescents to increase their abstract, idealistic, and logical thinking abilities. Adolescents begin to think in more egocentric ways. They often act as if they are on stage. Socio-emotional changes include the quest for independence, conflict with parents, and a desire to spend more time with peers. Achievement, both academic and personal, become a primary focus. Increased sexual maturation, which is a biological process, often produces a greater interest in pursuing romantic relationships. The transition from childhood to adolescence is an incredibly complex, and it involves changes in numerous aspects of an individual's life. In order to navigate this transition successfully, adolescents need ongoing support from adults. Transition from adolescence to adulthood focuses on cultural standards and experiences. It occurs between the ages of 18 to 25 and is often characterized by economic and personal temporariness. Let's talk about emerging adulthood. Arnett concludes that there are 5 key features that characterize emerging adulthood: identity exploration, instability, self-focus, feeling in between, and possibilities. Examine the possible markers of becoming an adult. Do you agree? Perhaps the last subtopic worth mentioning under the nature of development centers on developmental issues. The majority of the students taking EDPY are pre-service teachers or in a related field. Consequently, many of us have discussed at length the nature versus nurture debate. This debate centers on whether development is primarily influenced by biological inheritance or environmental experience. The continuity versus discontinuity debate focuses on the extent to which development involves gradual, cumulative change or distinct stages. Finally, the early versus late issue focuses on the degree to which early experiences or later experiences are the key determinants of development. Now let's move on to the science of adolescent development.
As the textbook outlines, science is not defined by what it investigates, but how it investigates. By following the scientific method, a four-step process, we can better understand the topic being studied. In our case, the using of scientific method allows us to understand adolescence. Sigmund Freud believed that adolescents' lives were filled with conflict and tension. He argued that behaviors are only significant if we look at the unconscious forces beneath them. Freud regarded personality as a composition of three structures: the id, the ego, the superego. Freud suggested as we grow up, we go through 5 stages of psychosexual development. Our adult personality is determined by the way we resolve conflict at each stage. Erik Erikson proposed that there are 8 stages of development. At each stage, there's a specific development task that individuals must resolve. It is essential to acknowledge the differences between psychoanalytic theories and cognitive theories. Psychoanalytic stress the importance of the unconscious, whereas cognitive emphasize the conscious mind. We will now explore 3 cognitive theories. Piaget's cognitive theory states that individuals actively construct their understanding of the world and go through 4 stages of cognitive development. During each of these stages, individuals are required to organize and adapt in order to make sense of their world. These stages include sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. Vygotsky emphasized that individuals actively construct their knowledge and that social interaction and culture guide cognitive development. Interaction with knowledgeable adults ensures the success of an individual. The information processing theory emphasizes that individuals develop a gradual increasing capacity for processing information, which allows them to acquire increasingly complex knowledge and skills. Development is thought of as more continuous according to this theory. Before reviewing some behavioral and social cognitive theories, let's review the definition of behaviorism. Behaviorism essentially holds that we can study only what we can measure and observe. B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning theory states that through operant conditioning, the consequences of behavior produce changes in the probability of behavior's occurrence. Skinner's approach argues that development consists of the pattern of behavioral change brought about by rewards and punishment. Albert Bandura's theory recognizes that behavior, environment, and cognition are key factors in development. His research focuses on observational learning, which is learning that occurs through observing what others do. Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory holds that development reflects the influence of 5 environmental systems: microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, macrosystem, and chronosystem. The microsystem is the setting in which adolescent lives take place. It is in this system that the most direct social interactions take place. The mesosystem involves relations between microsystems. The exosystem consists of links between a social setting in which the adolescent does not have an active role. The macrosystems involves the culture in which the adolescent lives. Finally, the chronosystem consists of the patterning of environmental events and transitions over the life course, as well as the socio-historical circumstances. As stated at the beginning of this section, no single theory that we have outlined can explain adolescent development in full. However, each has contributed significantly to our understanding of development. If we take on an eclectic theoretical orientation, which does not follow any one theoretical approach, but instead selects from each theory whatever is considered the best features, we can better understand adolescence. Now here are some methods for collecting data for research in adolescent development. There are 3 types of research: descriptive, correlational, and experimental. Time span of research can vary. Check out our example of cross-sectional research in which surveys were used. It is important to conduct ethical research and minimize bias.
This concludes our webinar on Chapter 1, An Introduction to Adolescent Development. This chapter provided a brief overview of historical perspective, global perspective, nature, and science of adolescent development. Thank you for watching and listening. See you in class.